Thank you, Sandy, and good evening, everybody. I'm going to crack on because I've got 10 minutes and lots to say. So if we could have the slides, please. So I am going to talk about rewilding and restoration, but we have a problem. And so first I need to put that into context to explain exactly why this is urgent. So as we all know, the ocean is a major life support system for us and the rest of the life that lives on this planet. It also absorbs at least 25% of our carbon emissions and has absorbed about 90% of the heat generated through climate change. You'll be familiar with this graph. This global average temperature increase is unprecedented in its speed, and it's one of the greatest challenges that humanity will face. The evil twin of global warming is, of course, ocean acidification. And as one graph goes up, another goes down. That is the pH level of the ocean. As it absorbs all this carbon dioxide, it becomes more acidic, and that creates all sorts of trouble for species and habitats throughout the ocean. So with these combined evil twins, we are likely to see destabilization of our weather systems, of our current systems, and marine ecosystem destabilization and collapse, particularly as we get above the sort of 2 degrees C warming. In the UK, I feel like we're sort of experiencing the calm before the storm, whereas our brothers and sisters across the world are really already in the thick of it. But by 2050, we're going to really feel this, certainly through the effects of flooding, which are going to inundate vast swathes of our coastal communities. And every day on the news, we see the sort of profound societal and political impacts that climate change is exacting on people across the globe. This is, of course, all in the context of a historical mismanagement of our seas. Now, management of fisheries is definitely getting better, but still 41% of stocks in the Northeast Atlantic are overfished. And we recognized almost 20 years ago that there'd been a catastrophic decline in large predatory fish in the Atlantic Ocean. Some of those fish populations are recovering as a result of better fishery management. But I'm afraid the same can't be said for sharks. And a very recent study showed that at least more than 1/3 of sharks and rays are threatened by overfishing across the globe. Of course, it's not just a problem overseas. Some of our once common sharks are now considered critically endangered. It's not just the species that we're losing. We're losing some of the very habitats that can help us fight climate change. So post-char blue carbon habitats such as seagrass and salt marsh, we've lost most of them over the last 150 years. We've got vast stores of carbon that should be stored for perpetuity in our seabed, at least 424 megatons of organic carbon, over 2,500 megatons of inorganic carbon. But again, because of the way that we're mismanaging our seas, that carbon is in peril. And where it should be stable in the seabed, we're finding that bottom trawling disturbs that carbon, releases it back into the water column. And estimates suggest that we might suffer £9 billion worth of losses in carbon release if we carry on with business as usual over the next 25 years. And that's just from our seabed. So we have a climate and nature emergency. And indeed, the UN Secretary General, I'll say that again, the UN Secretary General said in October this year that climate crisis is a code red for humanity. So we've got to have hope. And while COP26 was a cop-out in terms of phasing out fossil fuel use, there were fantastic gains for the ocean. And Anna, in her session, is going to talk about that. But as Sandy said, the ocean was recognized as a key player in mitigating climate change. So ocean-based solutions, well, we have to understand that they are only going to close about 25% of the emissions gap. So if you look at this graph, the red line is business as usual. Those are the emissions we're going to be at up 2050 in order to reduce the global warming to below 1.5 degrees C or 2 degrees C. We need to be getting to those blue and green lines. And you can see that ocean-based solutions can cover about 25% of that emission reduction. Of course, the majority of emission reduction has to be decarbonizing our economies and reducing our reliance on fossil fuels. That is the number one priority. But ocean-based solutions can work alongside that. Ocean-based solutions to mitigating climate change are varied. They range from renewable energy at sea, to reducing emissions from shipping and fisheries, to better management of wild capture fisheries and aquaculture, and of course to marine ecosystem conservation, restoration and rewilding. And this is the decade on ecosystem restoration, the UN Decade of Restoration. We have to act now, we have to act fast, and the UK has to play a part in that. I mentioned the word blue carbon. Chris, in her session, is going to talk about blue carbon. But for those who aren't familiar with it, it's essentially the carbon that is taken out of the system by marine living organisms in mangrove, salt marsh, and seagrass habitats. Those are the poster child blue carbon habitats. Taken out of the system and stored in the sediments. But there are also carbon services provided by marine vertebrates, fish and whales and sharks that can fix carbon and also fix it into the deep seabed as they fall to the sea after they die and decompose. So it's not just about those blue carbon habitats. And in fact, in a recent estimate suggested that our commercial stocks in UK waters sequester about 1 million tons of carbon annually. So imagine if those 41% of overfished stocks in the Northeast Atlantic were properly managed, how much more carbon they could sequester. So Blowfish was right. Clean and healthy ocean is what we need. We need to rewild the ocean, not only for the biodiversity that we've been banging on about for 30 years, but also to help us mitigate climate change. So what is rewilding? Well, we're partners with Rewilding Britain, and they define rewilding as the large-scale restoration of ecosystems to the point where nature is allowed to take care of itself. It seeks to reinstate natural processes, and it's very much forward-thinking and future-thinking. We're not trying to get back to some historical state. Our environment has changed irreversibly. We're allowing nature to take us to the next place. There are 5 principles of rewilding. Again, I'm not going to go into detail here. Go to the Rewilding Britain website and you can read into them a bit more. But it's all about supporting people and nature together. It's about letting nature lead and reinstating natural processes. It's about creating resilient local economies and finding opportunities for livelihoods that thrive alongside nature. It's about allowing nature to work at scale, giving nature enough space to rewild itself, and it's about securing benefits for the long term. Now, rewilding is mentioned in one of my favorite papers of the last 10 years. It's really optimistic, and if you don't do anything after tonight other than read this paper, then you'll thank me. Rebuilding marine life, according to the authors, represents a doable grand challenge for humanity, an ethical obligation and a smart economic objective to achieve a sustainable future. And basically, it sets out a roadmap about how we can rebuild our oceans. It talks about the rise in ocean restoration and in rewilding, such as this fantastic project by the Virginia Institute of Marine Science and Nature Conservancy, where they've restored over 3,500 hectares of seagrass along the Virginia coast, which are now sequestering about 3,000 metric tons of carbon per year. It talks about the amazing recovery of some of our big megafauna, like the great whales, where 47% of 124 assessed populations were showing a significant increase. And another study, which kind of appraised why that's such a good thing in monetary terms, was by Ralph Chammy and his colleagues a couple of years ago, where they reckoned that just the monetary value alone of a great whale is about $2 million. And that the stock of great whales is worth easily over $1 trillion. And that appraisal was worked out looking at the whales' contribution to the food chain and increasing fisheries, to its value as a whale watching tourism asset, but also how they sequester carbon, not only through fertilizing phytoplankton, but also as the whales, as I said before, die and sink to the bottom, how they sequester carbon into the seabed. So recovery is worth it. They also talk about the need for more marine protected areas, and we support the call for 30% marine protected areas by 2030. At the moment, there's only about 7.5%, so there's still a lot of work to do. So what about rewilding in the UK? Well, there's several examples, and I haven't got time to talk about them all, so I'll mention a few. But I think the thing that's really important for us is the management of our marine protected areas. We have about 372 marine protected areas in the UK, covering about 38% of our seas. Only a few very small ones are fully protected. many of them still allow bottom trawling, which means that the biodiversity and the blue carbon in those sites is just not protected, and that needs to change fast. For example, if we excluded bottom towed gear from all our offshore marine protected areas in the UK, then we would be rewilding about 30% of our seas immediately. And that is certainly something that we will be fighting for in the coming years. We're also a partner of the Rememory project led by the Environment Agency, which seeks to restore reefs, seagrass meadows and oyster beds, and restore about 15% of those habitats over the next 40 years. It's a £30 million project, which estimates to have about £50 million worth of monetized benefits over the next 40 years, including, for example, restoring and creating salt marshes through coastal realignment, which will help us in the long run mitigate the effects of flooding through sea level rise. We're also a partner in Natural England's Life Remedies project, which Jean-Luc will be talking about later on. And that it looks to restore hectares of seagrass along the south coast of England, but also to protect existing seagrass through advanced mooring systems, which is something that we've been investing time and effort in over the last few years. We're a partner in the Deep project up at the Dawn at Firth, which is looking to reintroduce 40 hectares of native oyster reef, using 4 million native oysters. And we're also part of the Sussex Kelp Restoration Project, which is looking to maximise benefits from the groundbreaking Sussex nearshore trawling bylaw that was brought through by the fantastic efforts of Sussex IFCA, and will be protecting 300 kilometres squared of nearshore habitats, particularly to allow historical kelp forests to come back and recover and rewild. So what do we want? Well, over the next 10 years, we are going to be fighting for 30% of UK seas as highly protected marine areas, including 10% fully marine protected areas. And that in itself will be a major rewilding victory. We want to see exclusion of bottom towed gear as soon as possible from our offshore MPAs by 2024 at the latest. And the government has actually committed to that. So we'll be pushing for them to go for the best possible management measures in those MPAs. We want to see bottom towed fishing gear free zones around the entirety of the UK coast, and we'll be supporting ambitious projects to restore key biodiversity and blue carbon habitats such as seagrass, salt marsh, oyster reef and kelp forests around the UK. But we also must rewild ourselves, and so we're putting a lot of effort into ocean literacy and connecting our young people back with the ocean. Many of them are miles ahead of us. Many of them need support. And if you want to find out more about one of the projects that's doing that, look at We Are Ocean. How is all this going to be funded? Well, the recent green bonds issued by the government raised about £10 billion with a further £90 billion worth of orders. So there's obviously investor appetite into green projects. But how about green bonds? Obviously are very attractive. How about blue bonds to raise money specifically for ocean rewilding? So I think we have the skills and the expertise. I think we have there's money out there that we can connect to these skills and expertise. We need the societal will and we need the political will, but we can do this and we can fight climate change and rewild our oceans. So thank you so much for listening, and I look forward to talking about this later on in the program, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the meeting.
Thank you very much, Peter. There's so much going on in there. Ladies and gentlemen, all the whole AGM is going to be available to watch online after this. So, if you feel like you missed anything, I mean, that was just fantastic. Chock full of information, like a meaty bar of delicious goodness, because who doesn't love that? But speaking of meaty, delicious bars, we are now going to go into our breakout sessions, our 10-minute breakout sessions. So now's the time. We're going to have 5 experts, all with a range of topics. So select your breakout room and access your chosen session accordingly. All rooms are going to be monitored by the first event team. So if you've got any problems, they'll be doing all the magic behind the scenes. And don't worry if you think, I want to see this, I want to see that. All the sessions will also be online afterwards. So now's the time. Choose your session. Go and get involved. Enjoy it. We'll see you in about 10 minutes or so. Enjoy.